People get determined to take bold steps in different ways, but most especially learn from their mistakes. John thought that moving out of his country was the best, till he realized there was a better way to bring change. In the opening scene of Blue State, we see a political activist for Kerry's campaign, John Locke, going from door to door, campaigning for people to vote for Kerry, but no one is interested. All of them bang the door in his face. John Locke is the owner of a blog, The Donkey Revolution, and is a graphic designer who left his job for a campaign. Later, Kerry's supporters are in a mini-party with John. While on stage, John, in his drunk and disgruntled state, makes a promise and even swears on his life to move to Canada if George Bush should be elected president. He should have never had too much drink, because he will regret this promise. After all the election procedures, Bush wins the election. As John is watching the jubilant Bush celebrating his victory, he is angry. John and Hal are in a bar, with John expressing his anger at Bush's win. Hal reminds John about the promise he made before the election, but he didn't think anyone would take the promise seriously. John gets back home and listens to all his voicemails. The last of the voicemails is from a group of his friends singing mockingly about him moving to Canada. Since things didn't go the way he planned, John goes back to work. When he gets into the building and runs into Esther, his ex, Esther senses that John may be back at work to get his old job back, so she reveals that his old job is gone. John's life seems to be taking a bad turn. John, in his sad state, starts talking about having Esther back, but he notices the ring on her finger. John always had the thought that he and Esther were on a break, but he didn't know she was seeing someone else, even to the point of having an engagement ring. Esther didn't wait for him for that long, because she didn't know when he'd be back. John discovers the man to which Esther is engaged is Craig, her colleague at work. He walks out of Esther's office filled with sadness. John once again listens to the voicemail sent to him, and there's one from a lady named Gloria. Gloria is a member of an organization, MarryACanadian.com, that helps Americans establish roots in Canada, and they'd like to help him. She leaves her phone number at the end. John immediately calls Hal, because he thinks he's the only one that could have given his info to Gloria's organization. But Hal claims he didn't do so, and John angrily ends the call. How did she get his number? After getting off the phone with Hal, John goes through MarryACanadian.com and decides to call them. He discovers that a friend of hers saw on TV the footage about him planning to move to Canada if Bush won the election. John thinks that everything he read on their site, including the organization's help in finding a Canadian to marry to gain citizenship, is a joke, but Gloria confirms that they're all real. At the end of the call, John promises to be in touch. Later that day, John goes through the organization's site and signs up. After all, there's nothing of importance again for him in America. No job, and no love life. He goes ahead to write a post on why he's moving to Canada, and posts an ad for a travel partner. John interviews two men that respond to his ad, and then a young girl. Chloe Harmon is the last to be interviewed. Although he finds Chloe attractive, he still settles down to hear her reasons for wanting to leave for Canada before making any decisions. Chloe meets John in a coffee shop, and after exchanging pleasantries, they settle down for the interview. Chloe also wants to know a few things about John, since they may be going together. Chloe claims she too was working on the campaign for Kerry, and now that Bush is president, she wants to leave America as soon as possible. To show how serious Chloe is about leaving for Canada, she tells John that she could even travel the next day if possible. Seeing how hot and good-looking Chloe is, John doesn't fail to tell his friend about her. Hal believes traveling with the girl comes with other motives. In his defense, John explains that he's just going to make a political statement, and not do anything with Chloe. This makes Hal give John instances of men like Gandhi and Martin Luther that also did politics without getting involved with women. These men were humiliated and shot at, and that is the essence of their campaign. He thinks that John going for his political statement in Canada with the hot woman is described as a sex romp. John is surprised that Hal, who was practically forcing him a week back to fulfill his promise, isn't supporting his decision anymore. All that Hal says doesn't change John's mind, because he is even ready to give up his American citizenship. John picks up Chloe and they hit the road, on their way out of America. We'll see how their journey goes. While driving, John suggests that they stop by a store and get some groceries and a cooler. After saying this, it dawns on him that he didn't even ask Chloe about her financial situation, so he tries to explain. But Chloe is okay with the idea. Chloe suggests they stop for gas, but because of the map and everything that John put together in the book, he knows that there's a better place to stop for gas. John even goes ahead to show her where it's marked in the book, and Chloe is surprised at how detailed his work is. They finally reach the gas point that John marked out, and also go into the convenience store to get something for their trip. Coming out of the convenience store, John gives Chloe the keys so that she can drive for a while, but she can't drive stick. John is surprised because his flyer stated that the applicant must be able to drive stick, but Chloe says she thought the flyer said the applicant must know how to drive standard. So now, it appears that John alone will drive to Canada. It's night, and John pulls over in front of a hotel where they'll spend the night. John reminds her that they didn't even talk about the rooming situation, and Chloe is okay with either staying in the same room or separate ones. She then suggests that they take a room that has 2 beds, and if not, then they'll take separate rooms. John offers to even sleep on the floor if it's a room with 1 bed available. When they get in, it's only rooms with 1 king-sized bed that are available. John thinks a king-sized bed is big enough for both of them to sleep at different ends of the bed, but Chloe doesn't feel comfortable with it and suggests they should get 2 rooms instead. After paying for the rooms, they both go to their separate rooms. John puts on the TV in his room and sees Bush on TV. Bush is talking about how it has been his style of earning political capital in the campaign and spending it when he entered power. John watches the news for a while and then wants to post on his blog, but there's no network connection. He then goes outside the room with the laptop. On the other hand, in Chloe's room, she picks up her bag and walks out, and sees John outside too. She's surprised to see John outside with his system, because they're supposed to go and eat. Seeing no need to explain, he just goes into the room, drops his laptop, and they go for dinner. While they're eating, John engages Chloe in a conversation. Since Chloe engaged in the campaign, she must have left a job, so John wants to know the job she was doing. Chloe claims she was a physical education teacher. John asks her how she got into teaching physical education, and while she's trying to mutter something to him, the waitress comes with their food. Immediately after the waitress leaves, Chloe feels like the waitress's arrival made her dodge a question she didn't want to answer. So at once, she changes the subject of discussion and asks to know more about the Canadian organization. John explains that the organization helps Canadian immigrants to find jobs and meet new Canadians. He purposely skips the part of finding partners. When they get back to the hotel room, Chloe suggests they should continue their journey by 7 the next morning. But John thinks it's too early, so they agree on 8:30. When John goes in, he gets busy going through TV channels till he finds one talking of 3 cabinet members that submitted their resignations, and he settles for that and finally sleeps off. The next morning, John teaches Chloe how to drive a stick, but seeing that it'll make them waste a lot of time on the road, he thinks it's better he just continues driving. They stop again for gas, and while the tank is getting filled, John steps aside to make a phone call to his mom. He and Chloe will be staying at his parents' house before they continue their journey. John gives his mom a brief description of Chloe as a girl with blue hair who may probably be a lesbian. After the phone call with his mom, John remembers something he didn't tell Chloe and decides to tell her at this point. His parents live in a small town in Washington, and they will pass through there. Chloe isn't offended that John didn't mention it earlier. She doesn't mind parents, as long as they are not hers. Surprisingly, Chloe asks John for the keys so that she'll drive. While they're driving, Chloe decides to change the song playing, so she reaches out for a CD. She's surprised that John has them arranged in alphabetical order, and John is quite embarrassed. He offers to look for the CD himself so that Chloe can concentrate on her driving. John finds a CD of his project and slots it into the car player. The CD plays with Bush talking. Chloe doesn't quite get the reason why she should be listening to whatever Bush is saying. After all, they don't like him. But John tries to explain to her that it's his mistakes that should be listened to, because sometimes he tells people the truth from what he says. The way John takes all these things seriously, and even has time to make a CD and title it Bushism, is very amusing to Chloe. They travel for a while, then stop again for gas. Approaching John's parents' house, Chloe thinks it's wise enough for her to know some important things before she gets there. John is scared that his parents may not like Chloe, and doesn't know if he would be able to handle it. Chloe is disappointed that at John's age of 28, he's still scared about bringing home someone his parents may not approve of. Chloe tells him there's no need to be scared, because they're not even dating. When John and Chloe get into the house, John's mom is in the kitchen. She is so busy with the meal she's preparing, and she doesn't even turn to look at them till she tidies up what she's doing. She hugs her son, and John, on seeing the meat his mom has prepared, reminds her that he's a vegetarian and doesn't eat meat. Mrs. Log turns to Chloe, and John introduces her. Her reaction towards Chloe is awkward as she notices her neckpiece. Mrs. Log asks Chloe for assistance in setting the table, and she agrees to help. When his mom leaves the kitchen, John informs Chloe that they could leave if she wants, but Chloe is okay. John's dad comes back home. He is a confirmed Republican, and the first thing he does when he sees John is talk about politics, and how Bush won the election over Kerry, who is a Democrat. Mr. Log is not supportive of John being a liberal. He thinks that people like him are the problem in America because they always whine, complain, and criticize. When John's dad mentions that they got some terrorists in Baghdad, John criticizes his point, stating that 14 American troops lost their lives. They soon start arguing, although John is very calm, unlike his father. Soon, John's dad gets very upset when John likens him to a flag-waving monkey for repeating all the information he hears without looking into the real thing. Later, they're all eating at the table and once again Mr. Log starts a conversation with John. He wants to know why an intelligent person like him would want to vote for Carrie. John prefers not to answer his question, because it looks like a stepping stone to a heated, unnecessary argument. But his father seems interested in the rant, and says it's unpatriotic not to want to talk about it, even though John doesn't answer his father's question. What he says after that triggers a heated argument between him and his father, to the amazement of Chloe. John's dad gets upset when he mentions the brave boys that are giving their life for and fighting for America in Iraq as a huge mistake and a pointless war, so he turns to Chloe to continue the conversation with her. John sees what his father is trying to do and wants to stop him, but his dad shuns him. John's dad tells his wife to open the phone lines, which she understands and stands up with her food. Chloe, seeing how tense the place is, also stands up and follows Mrs. Log to the kitchen. When they get to the kitchen, she tries to find out from Mrs. Log what the problem is. Mrs. Log reveals that they have a son who is a soldier in Iraq. This now explains why John's dad got angry when he spoke about the government his dad supports, making innocent boys risk their life in Iraq. John's mom takes Chloe to see some pictures. Back at the dining table, John's dad finally tells him to leave the house, because he can't have him saying such things in his house. While they're still looking at the pictures, John joins them and informs Chloe that they're leaving. John's mom, knowing that her husband hasn't always been the way he is now, asks John why he always provokes his father. John doesn't reply, but just hugs his mom, who has no choice but to thank him for stopping by. They have a quiet journey until Chloe breaks the silence and asks John why he didn't tell her that his brother was an Iraqi soldier. He doesn't think it was important to tell her, because they've known each other for just 2 days. Chloe understands it's hard for his parents to listen to what he's saying, seeing that they have a child in Iraq, but John believes he's doing what's best for everyone. When Chloe stays on the matter, John gets upset, and even goes to the point of transferring his anger to Chloe, and shouting at her to go back and stay with his parents instead of talking about what she doesn't know about. Chloe also shouts back at him and they both stay quiet afterwards. They get to a hotel to pass the night and book 2 rooms. The next morning, while Chloe is busy making her tea, John comes to her, but she just ignores his presence. John apologizes for his actions the previous night. He is in a good mood that morning because they'll be crossing into Canada. Later, they're back in the car, and when Chloe sees the Canada border road sign, she tells John that she needs to use the toilet. John informs her they'll stop on the other side of the road. But Chloe insists that it's urgent, and she shouts at John to pull over. John still tells her to relax, since they'll soon get to the other side. But yet again, Chloe insists she can't wait till then, because she can't even go to the other side. This finally makes John stop the car and ask her what is so important that she must do urgently. Chloe reveals that she's in the army, and she's supposed to be shipping out the next day after doing 1 tour in Iraq. John is quite confused by what she's saying. She goes on further to tell him that the blue hair and everything were just for the road trip, and that she's not even a physical education teacher. We now know why she changed the conversation immediately. Chloe tells John to drive her back to Spokane, then she'll go back home from there. John is shocked to his bones. He believes there's no need to give up at this point, since they're just like a mile away before they'll cross the border. However, Chloe says she can't continue, because they'll run her passport. Even though she came on the trip for a reason, she has changed her mind, and doesn't want to continue the journey. John doesn't think it's the best idea for her to go back to Iraq and get shot, so he starts to motivate her to just continue the trip. After much persuasion and encouragement from John, she agrees and they drive off. When they arrive at the border, there's an immigration officer who stops them and asks for their passports. On asking them their purpose of visit, John lies that they're visiting his aunt that stays in Winnipeg. He finds it difficult to continue the lie when the officer asks for his aunt's name, but after a moment, he gives the officer Gloria's name as his aunt's name. They successfully pass through and get into Canada. On arriving, they're both very much excited to be in Canada. Now settled down, Chloe starts to reveal some things about herself to John. Chloe's great-grandfather, grandfather, father, and uncle were both in the army, and her mom was an army brat. Since Chloe didn't have any brothers to continue the family's army tradition, the hope fell on her. Chloe didn't go into the service straight away. She tried college for 1.5 years, but then dropped out. Started going from job to job, and lived with a guy she shouldn't be living with, because she couldn't afford her place. With all these circumstances, she didn't see going into the family tradition as a bad idea. John is surprised she went in on her own without the fear of the war, but she tells him that the recruiter promised her that since she's a woman, she'd never see any combat. John tells her recruiter's lie, but Chloe believed her recruiter, because she asked him the same question thrice and he assured her thrice. After talking about herself, Chloe wonders why John never mentioned his brother to her, and he says it just never came up. Chloe now understands why he talks about the war all the time. But aside from the pre-election promise he made in a drunken state, she feels like he's running away. John agrees that he's running from George Bush. They get back to their hotel room, and this time, they're staying in one room with 2 beds. Chloe is tired, and John even suggests that he plays music to help ease her tiredness. Chloe is quite confused about why music should help her. But before John gets back from the bathroom to freshen up, a tired Chloe is already sleeping. The next morning, they're on the road to get to their final destination. Chloe is concerned if they're going to an office, because she didn't bring her resume. However, John jokingly tells her she could tell them she's very good at camouflage. When they arrive at their destination, Gloria, on seeing John, runs to hug him like they're old-time friends, even though it's the first time that they're meeting. She introduces herself to a puzzled Chloe as the president of Marry a Canadian. Gloria's pizza order arrives, and John helps her carry it as they both follow her into the house. On entering the house, John and Chloe are surprised at how nice the place is. They're even more shocked when Gloria shows them two people that just got married and only met 2 days ago. John doesn't think 2 days is enough time to get to know someone, but Gloria tells him that it'll be easier for him, because some of the girls he flagged are already in the house, so she'll introduce him to them after he has settled down. Chloe looks at John in perplexity, because she was oblivious to this part of the arrangement. When Gloria leaves them alone, angry Chloe confronts John for not telling her about Marry a Canadian, and she walks away. In the next scene, Chloe is not having fun at all, and she walks up to John, hoping that he'll also be feeling bored, but John claims to be having fun. While they're still talking, a girl called Rebecca approaches John, and they start talking while Chloe just walks upstairs. There are other Americans who left their country as well. Later in the night, Gloria takes Chloe and John upstairs to show them to their rooms. She notices that they are not a couple, so she gives Chloe the last free room. Then she takes John to her room and gives him a fold-out to use. John notices that Gloria is trying to flirt after asking if he met anyone he likes, so he diverts his attention to the fact that the people in the house are not very political. Then he goes to get his things from the car, and Chloe follows him to get hers too. Outside by the car, John informs Chloe that Gloria offered to show them around the town of Winnipeg the next day. John notices Chloe's saucy attitude and asks her what the problem is, and then the annoyance in her comes out. She's angry that John skipped out the part of marrying people, and then he accused her of lying by omission about being in the army. Chloe gets very angry, and they start ranting at each other. John finally calms down and starts walking towards Chloe, saying he should have done what he was about to do last night. She's confused at what he's about to do, and when he leans closer to her, she punches him in the face, telling him it would have been better if he did it last night. Then she carries her bag and walks into the house angrily. When John gets back into the house, he lies to Gloria that he slipped and fell from the stairs, and Gloria gives him some ice to put on his bruise. Gloria leaves the room and comes back with a shorter gown while John is already on the fold-out she gave him earlier. Gloria stands seductively by the door telling John that he doesn't need to wear his jeans to bed. He sits up and removes the jeans. After that, she goes ahead to invite him to sleep on the bed, since it's big enough for both of them. The next morning, they're at the dining table waiting for breakfast to be served. When Gloria brings the food, she flirts a little with John, and Chloe notices it. After breakfast, they go on their tour. While in the car, Chloe is still angry at John. They go curling, but Chloe doesn't participate. Instead, she just stays in one spot, eating. After the curling, Gloria thinks she and John should go later to the city hall to get their marriage licenses. John is puzzled, but Gloria explains to him that even after collecting the licenses, they have up to 3 months before they can get married. Gloria doesn't want John to feel pressured, so she explains to him that she's not pressuring him, but she just wants him to fulfill what he came to Canada for. Gloria takes John's hand and expresses her feelings toward him. She commends his blog and tells him how amazing his write-ups are. Gloria thinks that what happened last night was incredible. At this point, we don't know yet what happened. When they pull over at the city hall, John comes out last and catches up with Chloe to talk to her. Even though Chloe snaps at him, he still goes on to talk, but she's not ready to listen. Chloe unapologetically walks away, after talking about how John tried to kiss her just last night, and is now marrying Gloria, who is almost 50. When they go in, the man in charge of the license issuance mocks Americans, and he and Gloria laugh at them. John tries to defend his people, saying that their leaders are the cause of the Canadian hate of Americans, and not the citizens. But Gloria believes that it's the people that elect the leaders, so it's even. They're later given some marriage documents to sign. And they do, even though John does this after a brief contemplation. On getting back, Chloe checks out John's blog. There at Gloria's house, there's a wedding ceremony, and after the joining of husband and wife, Gloria calls John up to the stage and announces to the guests that she and John have gotten their license. They all clap, and Gloria turns John's head and kisses him. Chloe stays by the door with Randall, watching everything that's going on. John walks from the stage to Chloe, cleaning his lips on the way, and tells her they're leaving. Chloe mockingly tells him to ask his wife first, but John seems serious. Randall informs John that it's not good not to tell Gloria about leaving. John heads upstairs to get their things. Meanwhile, Randall doesn't want Chloe to go, and hopes that Chloe will join him. He even mentions his plan of attacking Bush. Chloe thinks it's dumb, and she just stares speechlessly at him. While John is coming down, Randall tells him that Chloe won't be going with him, but John thinks it's her choice to make. To show that he is serious, Randall reveals a gun, which frightens John. Chloe notices the gun and maneuvers her way to his pocket, picks up the gun, and knocks him to the floor, attracting everyone's attention to them. John has already packed their things, so he thanks Gloria and tells her they have to leave. Unhappy Gloria likens John's behavior to his being American, and it pisses him off, which makes him no longer even sorry for leaving. Chloe takes the gun with her, and Randall comes after her, but she points it at him till she enters the car. After driving a little distance, Chloe throws the gun out of the window. When they're quite far from the house, John finally gains composure from the shock he received earlier. They surprisingly start talking and laughing, forgetting that they even had unsettled issues. Later at night, they're still on the road. Chloe thinks they should stop for gas, but John wants them to reach a Petro-Canada station. Chloe doesn't think the station they buy gas from matters at all, because it's better to buy from any station than run out of gas. Suddenly, what Chloe was scared of finally happens. They run out of gas, and they now need to walk to an open restaurant to get help. When they enter, the man they meet informs them that gas stations are closed already. However, he can help them siphon a little, but first, he'll have to finish his food. Since they have no other choice, they agree and sit down to wait for him. At the table, the man starts a conversation with them, and they get to know that he's an American from San Francisco just like them, but he has been living in Canada for the past 35 years. After the man is done with his food, he siphons the fuel into their car, but it's not enough to take them far. So he suggests they sleep at his house, fill their tank, and continue their trip the next day. They agree to his offer and follow his car behind. The man, who they later learn to be Charlie, welcomes them warmly into his home. Charlie's reason for moving to Canada is similar to John's, because he moved to Canada as a conscientious objector to the government. Charlie explains to them that despite it seeming like he took a stand for an unjust war, like he thought back then in college when he decided to move, the reality is that he was just saving himself, and nobody cares about it. He even mentions the soldiers that run to Canada to save themselves, making Chloe nervous. Charlie makes them feel at home before going to sleep. Later, Chloe and John have both had a lot of beer, and John reveals what happened between him and Gloria the night they spent at her house. They didn't do anything because he was too drunk. John thought Chloe and Randall were together, but Chloe says he was at least talking to her. John, knowing what she means by that, apologizes for being an asshole to her while at Gloria's house. Chloe asks him where they'd go from there, but John says he's thinking they'd live there. However, Chloe wants to go back, otherwise she'll end up marrying a crazy Canadian just to gain citizenship. But John assures her they'll find a way out. Chloe, knowing what the troops in her squad will think about her, asks John what his brother will think about him, but he reveals that his brother is deceased. Shocked, Chloe finds it hard to believe. John's brother lost his life about 3 months ago in an accident. Even though John's parents know their son is deceased, they prefer to live in denial. Chloe comforts John and tells him to just drop her off a mile from the border and she'll walk the remaining distance. But being the only good thing that has happened to John in quite a while, he offers to take her back. She tries to discourage him, because he may end up getting detained if she's with him. At this point, John feels very attracted to Chloe, but asks her if she'll punch him again if he tries to kiss her, and she promises she won't. Then he leans in and they kiss. The next morning, after Chloe wakes up, she gets dressed before waking John. When they're done preparing, they bid Charlie farewell and start their journey. After driving a distance, Chloe tells John to stop so she can walk the remaining distance. He tries to insist on taking her, but she becomes serious and he pulls over. John is bothered about her, but she assures him that she'll be fine. She will face trial, and if she's lucky, she will be dishonorably discharged, hoping that something serious could go on between both of them. John asks Chloe, then she quotes a line that she read from his blog, "Politics makes strange bedfellows." They kiss, and then she heads off. On his way back, John turns around and heads back to the border. While he's being checked, John sees Chloe being carried away by an officer, but can't do anything about it. The day Chloe is released from prison, John is outside waiting for her. As she approaches him, they kiss. In the last scene, we see a bumper sticker that reads, "John Log for Senate," on his car. Realizing that change begins with him, John has finally taken the step to pursue his passion and make a difference in his country.